It was on that farm. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, Oscar. Kato has articulated very well the legal angle, and I thought he would be in his usual belligerent form as a human rights defender.
As a human rights defender defending the Acholi.
Defending the Acholi, people who think are very aggrieved in this matter. But he has come in a different shape that I'm even still shocked by his views. He's articulated the legal angle very well. There are people who say they have bought land legally and so forth. Even Angelo, who is arguing the politics, cannot tell us properly. Like, for example, those who bought legally, like Chairman Mao, whom did they buy from? So it is both a legal and political issue. The Chief Justice, the ministers, etc. This matter is affecting each one of them, however big you are. I have spoken to the Minister for Northern Region, the Honorable Dr. Kenneth Omona. He told me...
Who was recently Christian?
Yes.
I beg your pardon.
Who was recently Christian
by a member of your party?
I know the armed forces are not members of the NRM. So Dr. Omona told me that his farm, the barbed wire around his farm was cut, and some of the BALAARO started grazing on his land.
Now we appreciate the context of his enthusiasm.
Yes, his dam was invaded, and he had to use police to remove the BALAARO who had now taken over his dam, because his own cows now had nowhere to, So he gave me this background to address the issue raising right now, that why is the Chief Justice, why is the Minister for Justice, people who should be, appreciating the law better, why are they also anti-BALAARO? But you can see even ministers are not being spared in this matter. People with protection and so forth, even their farms have been invaded.
Invaded?
Yes, invaded, yes, to use the similar word, to borrow the word from Angelo.
Yeah. Invaded by BALAARO.
Invaded by BALAARO. He told me...
from Acholi himself. Is he an indigenous Acholi?
Dr. Mona?
Yes.
Yes, he's an indigenous Acholi who has migrated to Kaberamaido. But he's an indigenous Acholi. He's an Acholi. He's only No. He's not a Kumama. He's an Acholi. So
I would say let us leave him to confirm that, because that is not a settled matter.
Yes,
and it shouldn't matter, because I think even Dongo To is a Mahdi, I think.
He told me today that he would like to come to the capital gang to...
I've tried to invite him severally, but I failed to do that.
To give better context to this. So he told me that some of these BALAARO, yes, have acquired some land, a small piece of land, where the cows spend a night. Now that's like a kraal. But during day, they are all over the place in areas they have not acquired legally. So some of these things is what is causing this, the sentiment you hear in the north. He also told me, gave me an example in Otieno's park home, where I think somebody was killed in a scuffle between BALAARO and somebody over these issues. So it is both a legal and political issue. Politically, Angelo has really broken down the issues. There are deep-seated grievances by the people of the North, 20 years of war in IDP camps, and they come back from the IDP camps before they even settle down back on their land. There are foreign people now trying to occupy some of the land,
Today I'm going to learn many words. Did you say foreign?
Yes, foreign.
An occupation.
Foreign to the region.
Occupation.
Foreign to the region. Foreign to the region. They are coming from outside northern region and they are trying to occupy this land. So deep-seated issues like compensation have not been tackled by government, which people of the North really think it is a very big injustice. I was in the camp for several years. I suffered under war for 20 years. You have not compensated me. You have not yet fully integrated me into the national equation. And now you want me to deal with this problem. I think that's where some of these issues are coming from. I watched the Honorable Gengaratigo in one of the shows, and he articulated some of these issues really very well, speaking the language of the North. Yes, we are in Kampala, we hear some bit of snippets of what is happening in the North, but if people like the Minister, Dr. Mona, and the Chief Justice and so forth had not come forward to address these issues up to that level, I think we would have had a bigger problem. Because you can choose to close your eye and let the BALAARO graze cows, but you could end up with a much bigger problem, probably of violence or genocide against them tomorrow when this government is not there. Because right now you can say that my relatives have tools to use. They have tools, political tools, tools of violence and so forth that they can use to acquire some of this land and the legal tools and so forth. But tomorrow they might not have these tools and they might have a problem protecting them. So these are some of the arguments that actually the minister was making, and they made sense. That people now who have the tools should be able to use them in a just and fair manner so that there is coexistence tomorrow.
Okay.
Everybody can coexist. So the settlement of the people from the south in the north, it should be both legal but also politically accepted by the people of the north. Okay. The people should not be seen, the people of the north should not see this like they are being taken advantage of. No.
Okay. Benjamin Katana. That's another word I've taken now. Taken advantage of.
Thank you very much, Oscar. I think we are dealing with a cocktail of issues. The question of BALAARO, I think one would be wrong to strictly look at it in a legal sense or strictly look at it in a political sense, because or even social sense. Because when you are talking about ownership of property, acquisition of property, these are legal matters. But there are also some aspects that need to be interrogated. But I'll come to that. So in this debate, there are the knowns and the unknowns. The known knowns and the known unknowns, to use the phrase of Bush. And I think on account of political correctness, yes, I think on account of political correctness, there are some perceptions that have not come to the fore in this debate. For example, we have had an example of a minister who is from Kaberamaido but owns land in Achori. I don't think he's being considered among the people who should be evicted. So there is a perception by the people in the community.
For him, he's not being considered amongst those to be evicted.
Yes, but he also came from somewhere. There are people who look at this BALAARO as a front guard for an imperial force in the region. And that's a perception that we cannot wish away. I think it needs to be confronted and discussed and understood very well. That people do not just look at them as people who have come to in search of pasture and water, but there are other underlying motivations for the movement. It may not be true, but that's the perception. The other aspect that is important is that, and I think it has been hinted on by many people, the northern region, today we may be discussing Acholi, but I remember some time back there was a similar debate about Teso.
And Karamajong.
And Karamajong, but also there was also a debate about it. So you have a community that is emerging from war that has left families disintegrated, has left families impoverished, has left families displaced from their lands. Now, the interventions that the government has tried to put in place, in my view, were not well implemented, because I think the interventions, something akin to the Marshall Plan, should have been a very comprehensive rehabilitation program for both the people and the economy. We are now talking about the cities that are springing up, but these cities, while they have an effect on the lives of people, but it may not be so direct. If you go to these places where people used to have very prosperous farms, what is there? The farms...
in which area?
In Acholi.
Okay.
The cows were eaten during war, the equipment destroyed, barbed wire stolen and other equipment, and some of these ended up in different regions of the country. So while there is infrastructure development, if you look at the livelihoods of people, if you look, actually, even if you you looked at community resources like schools and hospitals in this region, where is the improvement? We have been told about the interventions. There have been a number of programs under the Office of Prime Minister, but there have also been the informal interventions, I think, that have been alluded to, largely led by Sare. But these interventions have largely been like deals. And money ends up, because they are done in darkness. They are not following a discussion by the country, by parliament, that these are the challenges and this is how they should be addressed comprehensively. So this money eventually ends up in pockets of a few people. That's the other day the country was discussing iron sheets meant for Karamoja being now in Gisu, in Uganda, in Bunyoro and other parts of the country. So these interventions, on account of the governance challenges of the NRM regime, have not had the intended effect on the lives of the people of northern Uganda. So when you are dealing with a community that is traumatized, both by impoverishment on account of war, but also the other effects of war, and then these other issues emerge, I think the debate cannot strictly be looked at in the legal sense. But the legal aspects cannot be ignored. Because if a person has acquired land through legal mechanisms, I think this person should not be treated as an invader. But the challenge is the shabbiness of the government and a weak state infrastructure. Because you see, the state of Uganda has an infrastructure up to the lowest unit of government, through local administration, local government, through internal security, and all these other organs of the state. But the challenge is that these organs of the state are largely distracted and involved in politicking and also deals. By the time these problems reach a boiling point, where were all these people of ISO, of what? These issues should have been raised to the people who make decisions made timely, but now we are dealing with a situation where it is at a boiling point. It means that someone somewhere slept on the job.
Wow.
Yeah, and like I mentioned...
Just conclude and then we go to Joseph.
Yes. But some of them have actually been accused of being part of that problem. Of course, the other aspect is that all these problems are reinforced by ethnic mistrust in our country. Angelo was giving an example of, which I think in my view is a different context altogether, if someone wanted to acquire Kasubi tombs and what have you. But the issue is that the other day I read a story.
If they
I think
had
it
the
was
money and everything.
Yeah, but that is a historical site.
Okay.
It's not. but you can acquire land owned by the Kabaka of Uganda. You can own a lease on the land owned by His Majesty the Kabaka of Uganda. So it's distinguishable. But the question of ethnic mistrust, the other day I read a story in one of the districts of northern Uganda where Baganda businessmen were being targeted and chased. But the government, instead of leading the country in a discussion that is aimed at healing and starting afresh, always chooses political convenience. And now we are going to a general election. Museveni, having largely lost his grip on rural Uganda, his calculation now is on Acholi. And that's why he has been signing all sorts of agreements with the leaders from Acholi, which agreements will not even translate into the transformation of the lives of the people. But like I mentioned, they are done in darkness. They are reduced into deals that will eventually benefit a few individuals, and the problem will not be solved. So I think we need to have an honest discussion in this country on how these matters can be solved. The government needs to approach this issue in an organized manner. Verify, know who owns the land legally, who acquired it through the right procedures, and is treated as a rightful or bona fide owner of land, and appropriate compensation is done if they are to move. Those who are there and they are just practicing nomadism, which is an outdated practice. They don't own the land, or they own some small piece of land and the animals are invading the farms of other farmers. I think those ones should be dealt with, but in a very organized manner, not knee-jerk reaction like we are seeing.
Before Joseph comes in, on that very point of what the government is going to do.
But even before, I was going to tell him he's also in a Buganda party. So people at his home ask him, why are you in a Buganda party?
No, even some Buganda ask, but this one, how can he be? Yeah, because as a country, we have failed to have that discussion. We have remained provincial in thinking. If you are a Musoga, you should be in a part of Basoga. If you are a Munyankore, you should be in a part of Banyankore. The country Uganda remains a name, but in terms of content and how we operate, we have failed to become a united state.
And is very mistrusted by the foot soldier. I don't know if you've heard about a group called Foot Soldier.
That is the opinion of NRM people like Duncan.
Oscar,
1 minute.
Yeah, before Joseph comes on, Katanaya talked about what the government should do and so forth. Yes, the government has set up a committee, a verification committee. So BALAARO, who have genuinely acquired land from somebody in Acholi or anywhere in northern Uganda, legally, they have fenced this land. They have a water source on the land, and they are not blocking any community road or blocking access to a water source for the community.
Shall not be evicted.
Are not going to be evicted.
Right.
So there is no need to worry. I think those who are worried are these ones we have been talking about, who have not followed the right procedures to acquire those lands.
Finally, you have spoken as someone in Ofonopondo's seat. So let's stop for a quick break and we'll go to Joseph Otieno.
BIMS. What is that? The Building Industry Management System. Just upload your documents online, submit, generate PRA, and simply pay through mobile money or the bank. Get an e-building permit, and that is it. That's it. Everything online. So no more. No more. Are you a developer? Get your e-building permit today through BIMS, the Building Industry Management System. Simply log on to bims.go.ug, upload your documents, and track your application step by step.
Safe building, better living.
My name is Liboy from Nairobi, Kenya. And
my name is Liboy from Uganda.
my name is Alibeki from Uganda. Right, it's so good to be here, the Pearl of Africa,
The evergreen country.
the evergreen country.
Welcome to Onomo Arts Experience
On the 6th of July,
this Sunday.
here at the Onomo Hotel. Onomo Hotel from midday.
Yeah, and from midday there will be workshops.
There will be markets, exhibitions. Food will also be there.
By the way, from 6, we are going to make you crazy.
Light up.
Time to dance from 6. Make sure you book your tickets. It's 30K.
Yes.
Come on.
Come experience it with us.
The Capital Gang on 91.3 Capital FM.
Welcome back from the break. It seems like land discussion is still going on. Joseph Otieno, you're on the microphone, and as we said, you're the most optimistic UPC person I know. I'm trying to look for the optimism in your submission this morning.
I quarreled earlier that you rejected the idea that you created yourself, that I am also the most optimistic Ugandan. You see why we need optimism. I think this is very important that we address this issue. It's very important that we address it soberly. I think it's important that we address it as a nation. And I think it's important that we acknowledge and accept that this is a political issue. The historical context, quite clearly, is I'd invite people, particularly those who can read, to look through for a documentary called A Brilliant Genocide. It's by an Australian filmmaker, Ebony Butler. It will tell you the amazing, sad reality of what happened in northern Uganda under this regime. I have attempted to persuade most Ugandans to read...
What happened to northern Uganda under this regime?
I'll contextualize, yes, indeed.
Yeah.
And I'll contextualize further by emphasizing something that people also reluctantly like to refer to, because it's important for this debate. Milton Obote's own notes on concealment of genocide in Uganda, written way back in 1990. As early as 1990, Obote gives depth to the massacres in Luweero and gives depth to whatever was already then happening in northern Uganda, meaning Acholi. And so when I hear my colleagues talking, all these things predominantly embed into this. So how we basically decide and choose how to respond is a different matter. Quite clearly, I don't think this is a matter for definition for BALAARO, because we all know what it is, and we all know the nuances that unfortunately brings everybody else to be contextualized and called Mlalo in this. Unfortunately, the issues, if you look at notes on concealment of genocide in Uganda and you look at the brilliant genocide, you'll realize that actually, if we deconstructed these, Ugandans are as diverse as they come. Luweero, before NRA went there in 1981, was the most cosmopolitan part of the Republic of Uganda. And I've said this again and again and again. I think I need to emphasize it. Because in Luweero were the founding parents of Idi Amin. In Luweero were every nationality, including Banyarwanda, and so therefore including some, quote, Balalo. All nationalities, identities across the Republic of Uganda. And people lived peacefully. Immediately, these guys entered. I have told you that there's a family in Nagongra, a guy who just passed hardly four months ago. He was chased. He lost land because you see the legality element. There is a group that is asking me, to try and help them, and Abdul will have a conversation about this, because it requires powers of members of parliament and things like that. So they come to me over mini surgery. They want compensation. These are communities that have been chased out of Uganda, and they lost land, they lost property. When I went to Miri, one of my classmates was a Japadola who came from Miri, and all I know is his surname, but he didn't even speak the Padola properly. So that's the possibility of this nation state that I talk about. But then what happened, where people come in and inject identity as a basis of seeking political power. So if then the net early victims of this were people predominant from the north and West Nile, and to less extent those of us from the east, but generally those, and it was about Wuno or Mucholi. Then you go to Teso, and you see what I saw with my own eyes. I was having a conversation with a decent friend of mine from NRM in another program, and where I talked about as a witness, and I've got the lawyers here, where I saw the Balalo, the Karamojong of the south, as I call them, cattle from Teso being siphoned southward in 1987 to the south. And we know this cattle ended up from really the north and east, backed by responsible political leaders from across the country. We needed to be able to have a conversation to simply say that, look, what do we do about these apparent things? As a refugee scholar, I've said this again and again and again, that the northern Uganda, which saw the death of GOONS, and northern Uganda that I personally contributed to compelling Mr. Museveni's regime to talk peace so that we end the war, needed an immediate post-conflict reconstruction program. Now, the people of Acholi, and I was also one of the campaigners, and I did memorandums upon memorandum, myself on behalf of Uganda People's Congress and others, that look, in Acholi, concentration camps were not the requirements, but this government, this regime, did it deliberately, mobilizing people to uproot them from their families, and they couldn't sustain them. After they did that and we failed in this debate, we said, okay, declare a state of emergency. Again, this guy is refused. Now, at the end of GOONS, which we forced this regime to create, people returning to their homes. Up to now, I know people who don't know their villages. By that, I know people, particularly from Acholi and Lango communities, who've never returned home to Uganda, leave alone to their own families, So people don't even know where their grandparents were buried. Maybe even some of their own parents were buried. Those are the focus that we needed to be putting ourselves in. It did not happen. Now, for that to happen, and then you find...
Before you leave the microphone, on that very point, there is a perception that your UPC government mistreated Ugandans. And that's some of the reasons they left the country and have never returned home. And I know Abdu has a stern look on his face, but some of the things that are attributed to UPC are unforgettable. And when you say things like this regime, people look at you and say, you just don't know what the UPC did.
No, there's nothing that UPC did that can be compared to what this regime did, particularly in Luweero and in Acholi and in Teso and including in my own Nagongere, because I don't know a circumstance. I don't know anywhere.
Joseph has a ready answer.
So there is none. But number two, I think after 40 years in power, and we're having a conversation in which we have BALAARO, unfortunately, in Acholi, some of whom came, and I saw this program the other day, came from Tanzania, people whom we don't know, entered the Republic of Uganda. I think it's a very difficult conversation to try and bring in Uganda People's Congress. In any case, we can still go back to Luweero where this foundation conversation did take place. Ugandans also need to be able to have a conversation and say, look, maybe the people who are in Acholi are experts in acquiring land, because we got into Museveni's top guys in government. How many of them have farms in Luweero, and we want to know how they acquired those. Kisozi, which is supposed to be a farm that UPC did very well for the people of Uganda. Right now, I don't know how Mr. Museveni acquired it, and sometimes the guy likes to boast about it. But it's fine. If only he boasted over that and readdressed the post-conflict situation in Acholi, meaning, let's resettle these guys, let's return them, let's equip them, let's enable them, and where possible, let's possibly even, in quote, teach them how to farm if they don't know. That's what you do. You don't say, we shall arrogantly pile up a group of people from TZ and come and teach you how to use your land. It is in the process of that becomes... No, Duncan, let me tell you. In the course of...
We need to tell Ugandans that the truth that there are no Tanzanians grazing in the north.
Oh, no. I'm coming to that.
These are Ugandans who had meandered into Tanzania with their cows, and they were chased by the government of Tanzania back into Uganda.
Then you need to
so they are not Tanzanians.
Then you need to tell Chris Barumuzi.
They are Ugandans.
You need to tell Chris Barumuzi to tell Ugandans properly, because it's the first time I'm hearing that element of rebuttal. But the reason why I refer to that, in any case, is that because they've been chased from Tanzania, does not give them the panacea. There's no panacea for them to find their way via Teso, get chased, Bunyoro, get chased, then conveniently find yourself in Acholi, and all of a sudden you have huge guns. All of a sudden you have huge guns and loss of money to an indigenous community which were amongst the largest cattle keepers in this country. You know, and finally, you know, Benjamin is quite right. You know, this identity question, because that's why I deliberately brought it out as a country. Because for me, I'm just tired, really. You know, that I am a Republican Ugandan or Pan-Africanist. I find it absolutely uncomfortable that, you know, a Benjamin Katana may struggle to go and find a farm in Busesa or in Agongera, or in this case, particularly perhaps somewhere in Atiak, because of the guys who now we know have been chased from TZ, but they conveniently have found space in Acholi. And in any case, the final point, you know, this grazing thing, you know, Mr. Museveni talks about culture. At what stage do we break the culture of cattle grazing and looking for water? Mr. Museveni has stopped it because he talked about commercializing it. You know, we are not helping the Karamojong to do so. We are not helping the Bateso whose cattle has not been restocked. But in Acholi, we are going to teach them how to do it. Quick point. There is a perception and possible reality that this land issue involves the question of Mr. Museveni one time going over Acholi and seeing this big expanse of land, say, oh, Bambi, Jesus, I wish this was there somewhere near Wachitura. That is one. But quickly, there is a belief, there is a belief
The conspiracy theory.
that, let him respond. There is a belief.
Is he one of the people that own farms in northern Uganda?
There is a belief that these things about land per se, don't forget that many of these guys come from very squeezed corners of Uganda. But number two, that the issues of minerals. And then number three, there's issues of oil. You know, all these are theoretical perceptions. So you can see how political these things are. So we need to have this open debate as Ugandans, but a debate that brings us together rather than one that breaks
balanced debate.
Thank you, sir.
By the way, Joseph, the biggest group of the BALAARO in the north, these are peasants who have no idea about your minerals or oil or whatever.
But
their interest is
peasants with guns.
Is grazing ground.
Peasants with guns.
Grazing ground. Mainly.
He's following up the line that Angelo brought up that says pacification and a front for other people. And you had also kind of mentioned
them
it.
Corporate BALAARO for a reason. You know, they have
you had also mentioned it that some of
corporate BALAARO.
Duncan, you mentioned that some people have power.
Corporate BALAARO, the DO is talking about, for example, generals, etc. Like now,
even smaller.
The
but
UPDF commanders in the north, because you are deployed in a region for maybe 10, 15 years. So you become part of the community. You acquire land because traditionally you are a cattle keeper. You move your cattle from Makore to the north. Yes, those are the corporate BALAARO they are talking about.
Fair point.
But like 90% of the BALAARO there are peasants who have no idea about
and to support them,
government,
to support them.
etc. Like 90%.
Joseph didn't make this point, but to support them. See, gentlemen, this idea of tribal identities for your party, which is a Pan-African party, it's a mass party, Pan-African party, okay, that has got a world view about integration in East Africa. Why aren't we talking about, you know, the dignity of those very same peasants? They're Africans, you know? The idea that we should identify them by where they come is bad. So whenever I hear Abdul that, you know, these guys came from, I don't know, you know, northern Tanzania or from Rwanda or from Congo or from Sudan, I ask myself, but what's wrong with that? You know, we embrace an African identity.
The other day, the president said, let's embrace everyone. You know?
Absolutely. And by the way, let me end this.
I agree as well.
Oscar, let me end this on the note of one of the most famous northerners from Acholi at a national level, the late Honorable Daudi Ocheng, MP. You know, he was a son of a chief, but he also was MP for Mitiana here, and a supporter of the Kabaka. There is a strong tradition.
A lot of people saw him as a true Muganda.
more than a true Muganda for all intents and purposes. But the point being that we cannot abstract that history, excise it. There is a Uganda where you, Duncan, can become MP for Moyo East, and that is still a possibility.
The Ochienos had a policy that you stand in one constituency, but you voted in another 3 constituencies, yes, something like that. The UPC2 government.
Abdul, you're on my. I don't want to. You can bring up so much history. There was a gentleman, Sogaman, wanted to stand in Western Uganda, and that was one of the tools used against him.
Yeah, he's actually my relative, Ngomangime.
Ah, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So
he performed very well. I think the difference was about 30 votes or 60. Yes. So so even the people who voted for him were not Wasoga, they were Banyankore.
No, he had more of.
So you were not on
a. Big discussion about this. If somebody has bought land and he owns it, and all Ugandans are entitled to live in any part of this country. If you are to go legalize, no problem. But is this issue about law? I doubt. I really doubt. This is about politics. It's about economics. It's about culture. 2, you see, after the war, the entire economy was literally destroyed. The entire economy was destroyed. What the Acholis remained with is only land and themselves, who had not gone to school, who didn't have proper even health services, just their bodies and their land. So after a few years, if there is another group that comes to sort of take away the land, but now that they can't take it away, they own it. And it makes matters worse, like I said last week, that generally the land tenure system is a naturalist communal, it's customary generally. The people who are coming are not coming to use that land under that tenure system. They are coming to convert this communal cultural land into individual private land. And that's where the crisis is now. So the Acholis now look at our land being taken away by these people. And that distinguishes the case of one of themselves. If, for example, there is a Mao who is trying to say, okay, now I can utilize, they might say, well, this is our brother. But even that is a debate within Acholi. It's a big debate within Acholi. People like Geno, Otema, and so on. The Acholis are debating, say, by the way, how did you acquire this clan land? This, yes, they are really debating it. So the BALAAROs have found themselves in this problem. But as somebody was saying here, how did we arrive at this point? Because we just knew it was coming. It was just a matter of time. Somebody, I think it was Mr. Katana here talking about the state infrastructure, ESOs and so on. But you see, this sort of BALAAROs who are having guns and so on, you can't divorce them from that infrastructure. So, because you say, I don't agree with that where he says the majority are peasants. They are not. No. Where do these peasants get guns? Where did these peasants get money to buy? In these large trucks, acreage? That's not true. That's really not true. You've not done your... I think your research properly. You need to look at it. So one,
he's in Ofonopondo's chair.
Oh yeah.
What do you want?
I don't envy you, my brother Duncan. It's a very difficult chair to sit in sometimes. So, and then there is also a history to it. One actually elite was talking to me this particular week, and he was raising the issue Joseph was talking about. That look here, even after the 1985 war, that war theater, you know, the famous Ruwero Triangle, from Kiboga, Muvende, the Big Mpija, and so on. We got a new, after 1985 war, you had a new class of landowners. And many of them had actually participated in the 1985 war. Many of them. And I'm sure, Duncan, you know this, that there are many people who participated in that war, and they went back and pissed out a little bit of... I don't know.
No comment.
I don't know about cases. So, and this actually was really serious. I said, look, this thing has been happening. Only that for us, the only thing we are left with after the war is land. And if it is taken away, you are really destroying us as Acholi people. And that's what the Acholi elite are thinking about. So it ceases to be purely a legal issue. It's about existential, you know, of the Acholi people. How are they thinking? And we go on. If, for example, in the next, because these guys don't have money, those who have money are not very many. And if people are just coming in, buying land, and you're poor, tomorrow you'll find that the Acholi are actually squatters on their own land, or what used to be their own land. And the reason is, when they say their own land, this is tribal land. This is clan land. There are very, very few pieces of land where these guys have titles. This title thing, I think somebody should do some research. How much of Acholi land is titled? It's very, very, very small. So what they are fighting for, according to this actual friend of mine, is their communal land being taken away. It's their tribal land being taken away. But at the end of the day, like I said last week, you are going to foot a big bill as taxpayer, because I can see legally there are so many illegalities being done, and at the end of the day you are going to see, you know, cases in court, and you're going to pick some bill, I'm sure.
Thank you.
Caught between a rock and a hard place.
I want to come back to Kato Tumusime. One of the reasons I should continue inviting Duncan Abigaba, he teaches me how to pronounce names. So it's Kato.
Yes, Kato.
Kato.
Oh, you're pronouncing it in Uganda? Kato.
Yeah, we have Kato, but Kato. So a couple of...
the meaning is the same. So.
The meaning, yes, indeed, it's the same meaning. But if you look at X, formerly Twitter, you have Otim, but his Mwine Edgar says at Opaya, that's Angela here. Context, please inform at Semoyamsoke and the listeners that in Ngoya and Amuru, Indians have leased square miles of land and are doing large-scale agriculture without such contradictions as with BALAARO. And it continues. Someone has said the same, or same of Salim Saleh. Then Vita Charles says, Angela has explained it well. Northerners have coexisted with other communities, including the BALAARO, some of whom are prominent religious leaders. These communities were significantly affected by war and recovery and may not come soon.